A salary is the drug they give you when they want you to forget about your dreams.
Welcome to the Corporate Dropout Podcast. I'm your host, Alacia Citro. If you're sick of the corporate hamster wheel and looking to feel inspired and empowered to live a high vibe life as your own boss, you're in the right place. Dare to drop out in 3, 2, 1. Are you a network marketer looking to step up your business, mindset, and habits in the next 90 days? Look no further than the 90-Day Habits Journal, a journal built by network marketers for network marketers. The 90-Day Habits is more than a journal. It's a 90-day blueprint to keep you in momentum, to keep you in activity, and to help you achieve the goals you set yourself in this business. At the end of the day, it's a habit builder to help you build the life you desire, doing what you love with who you love. And side note, I personally use this. It helped me rank up twice in 6 weeks in my new network marketing business. So it really works. Commit to your business today and get your hands on a 90-day habits journal, or better yet, get your team on board and watch your business grow. Use code CITRO, that's CITRO, for 15% off your order today. You'll be glad you did, and the link is in the show notes. Hello, friends. Today I am interviewing Dana Farber. She is a marketer with a soul. She went from being a chief marketing officer to becoming a recent corporate dropout and the founder of Moonstone Marketing, a vision-led marketing and social agency for intuitive founders. Love that. And she is also one of the mentors inside of the Collective. So with that, Dana, thank you so much for being here and coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Not only are you a total soul sister, and we discovered that very early on when we met each other, but I just love Corporate Dropout. I love what you're doing here. I've been listening to it since before I was a corporate dropout, and it definitely inspired me to take that leap.
Oh, that means so much. I didn't even know that. Well, I will receive that compliment. I'm getting better about receiving. And it's going to be fun to dive into your story today. So really, and you know this, but the goal of the show is like, let's empower and inspire people to drop out too. If you're miserable in your corporate environment, like there's a way out. So I'm excited to highlight your story and show other people that it's possible and that they don't have to be miserably chained to their desk.
No, absolutely not. And I learned that, the hard way, as I think we all do at some point, where you get to a point and you just feel that your soul is not, what you're doing isn't speaking to your soul anymore. And once you hit that point in your career, it makes it pretty hard to do even daily tasks, and everything just becomes a challenge. So before you even hit that point, I've started to figure out some of those warning signs as you get there. And that's where I'm at with a lot of my clients now, is maybe they're in the midst of that dropout or they're just launching their businesses. So it's really nice to kind of connect with a lot of people in that same phase.
Yeah. And help them evolve past it. And what you're alluding to, like, I call that the point of no return. Like once you have that revelation and that epiphany that you're out of alignment, there's really like no going back, right?
Exactly.
So I love to start at the beginning with everyone. And I was peeping your LinkedIn. All right. So you went to Northwestern and you were in Meghan Markle's sorority. Is it weird that I knew that? I didn't have to Google it.
No, no one does. Yes, it's totally a claim to fame. Yes, I went to Northwestern, go Wildcats, and that was my dream school. Fun fact there, to show you a little bit more about who I am, I applied to one school.
Wow.
And was kind of like, this is going to happen. And I feel like before manifesting was a very trendy thing, I completely manifested getting into Northwestern, come hell or high water. Didn't really have a fallback plan. Luckily, I didn't need one. And I would not recommend that to the younger generation. Definitely, apply to multiple schools. But I've always been very driven towards, singular goals, which I guess sometimes is a good thing.
I think the fact that you only apply to one college, like I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around that. I apply to like so many backup schools, but that just goes to show like the level of confidence that you have in yourself and the level of like decided heart, like, which is no surprise why you're a successful entrepreneur now.
Well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, I mean, whether it's charmingly stupid or stupidly charming, I feel like I kind of always decide to take the leap, whether or not the safety net's there. But luckily, I have a wonderful, support system, friends and family. My family's incredible, and they kind of always let me have that jump without the safety net because I knew that they were there. So I've always described it as I like to be a balloon, but I need someone to hold the string so that I can kind of float around. But with a safe distance.
I love that analogy. I'm going to have to borrow that. So while you were, I'll give you credit too. I always give credit.
Perfect. Yes.
So while you were at Northwestern, you majored in creative writing and you got your professional start with blogging. So tell us about that time in your life and how did it lead you into PR?
Absolutely. So that was 100% something about stumbling in the right direction. I hit, I think, a lot of people. And I will say that, a reason that mental health is such an important part of my platform and why I'm so open about it is because senior year of college, I hit that point where, up until that point, I'd kind of been that person who had jumped without the net. And then all of a sudden real life was happening. And I truly had that, oh shit moment of, I don't know what I want to do with this. I have a degree that is basically gearing me towards writing novels and no one is going to pay me to do that anytime soon. So blogging was luckily, it was a resource for me to just kind of have a creative outlet. So my blog that I started with was actually called Woodstock Wardrobe, and it was a vintage fashion blog. And I still love vintage fashion and vintage clothing and everything around vintage culture to this day. So my tagline that I still love and I'm very proud of, it was memory lane is just another runway. And that was my very early foray into taglines and branding. And so I kind of was self-taught there, had a WordPress blog, but that opened the door to me getting some other freelance writing gigs that eventually did turn into my first full-time position. It was a fully remote position as an editorial manager for an online media company, which is a lot of fancy words that I did not fully understand what they meant, but it gave me a really great education into understanding SEO and marketing and PR and kind of where everything starts to fit together. But having your first job be a remote job was definitely difficult because, it didn't really give me much to latch onto before everything, went remote. And this is, not to age myself, this is over a decade ago. So, that was definitely a big leap, but I kind of committed to the writing aspect of it and let my voice lead, which eventually got me to social media.
So let's talk about that pivot. And I told you before we started recording that we had some interesting synchronicities. So one I discovered as I prepped for this, you worked at a PR agency that I followed back when I lived in Chicago and was an aspiring fashion blogger. That blog has been removed from the internet, so don't even bother looking for it. But I was probably liking your posts that you were doing as that director of social media, because this was like 10 years ago when you were there.
Probably, yes. And so Skirt PR, shout out to Skirt PR in Chicago. That was my very first, I kind of consider it my first real job in that it just opened the door to everything else. So I did PR, I ran the social media department there. And, again, to kind of just give people, because I like for people to know that you do not need to be classically trained in any way. And that might be a little bit of a, controversial opinion, because I know a lot of people do spend years going to school for marketing, and I in no way want to, denigrate that, because that's amazing and everyone deserves every degree that they have. But I was 100% self-taught to the point that when I interviewed for that job for a social media director, I downloaded Instagram under the table in that interview. They're asking me questions about Instagram. It had just launched about 6 months before that, and I'd never posted on it because I just didn't really know what it was yet, and kind of, bullshitted my way through that interview. But you know what? A lot of it is in this life and in this industry, a lot of it is confident. It's confidence in yourself and knowing that you can figure it out. I definitely never recommend someone lying in an interview and then never, making good on the promises that they commit to. But if you are willing to put in the work to learn, I also think that it's okay to kind of overhype yourself in an interview process if you know that you're going to end up doing the work to get to where you claim that you already were. So take with that what you will.
No, I love that. It's like having the confidence that you can figure it out. It's not like, you were interviewing to be a brain surgeon and hadn't gone to medical school. Like
Exactly.
You can figure out Instagram, So how did your time in PR set you up for that next pivot into brand development and brand strategy?
So what I loved about PR is, and I still am a huge fan of PR as a marketing tactic, is that it's completely based on reputation. It's about building trust with media and then with consumers. And it's about really creating that storytelling aspect of a brand. So what I love about PR is it's not just based on, a story. It's based on the overall narrative that we're trying to drive. And that's what media respond to. And that's what consumers really respond to. So it really gave me a nice education and understanding that, yes, social media, PR, marketing, there's different tactics you can use, but they really all go back to a storytelling aspect. And having been a creative writer, that is where I thrive. I understand storytelling. I understand psychology and what motivates people. And so that kind of really gave me a mindset that this is something I can do. This is something I enjoy doing. I always loved when a new client would come on board and we'd have a big brainstorm session, create, what the brand looked like, sound like, felt like online. And I still to this day love that aspect of working with my clients, because that's where you really get the meat. When a client says something offhand that resonates with them and they think, I didn't put that in the marketing because I don't know where that fits. Those are the goal. Those are the moments where it's like, yes, that is your intuition. And the reason I use intuitive founders is because your intuition is so strong in a business. And if you are getting that nagging feeling of, I need to start this, use that element of what is guiding you. That is your intuition. And that should be what you build the entire brand on. So I really loved learning that. And then at the time, one of my clients was a boutique fitness startup called Barbie Fit. I helped them rebrand to the Barcode. Shout out to the Barcode. Love them so much, my soul sisters. And eventually it made the somewhat shifty move over from agency to in-house. It was absorbed by a client. It's never fun to leave an agency, but it was a great opportunity. And I loved that they had this very big mission around female empowerment. And they were trying to create a fitness studio and culture that looked different than what you saw typically in the bar world. Fitness isn't necessarily my number one passion in life. And I think everyone who knows me throughout the entire career I've been in fitness knows that about me. But I love the element behind it about empowering particularly women to embrace their strongest version of themselves. So I was able to make that leap. And pretty much as soon as I got in-house for them, my role went from social media to all together brand strategy, because I started to see how all the threads were tying together and started, going to my bosses saying there's ways to make this more efficient. There's ways to do this better. And they were luckily really receptive to that feedback. And we're like, great, if you want to do it, we're going to let you do it.
So I had no idea you were the brain behind the rebrand. That was the second fun synchronicity. So I lived in the Gold Coast of Chicago right before I moved back to California, and they had opened a studio like a block away from my house. And so when I saw that brand, I remember the original name vaguely. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool too. Was it hard? Like, were there any challenges moving from like PR around fashion, lifestyle, beauty into brand building for fitness? Like, was that a pretty big shift, or what was that like?
It was definitely a shift. I would say that going from an agency to in-house, and I've done the move backwards and forwards a couple times now. I really love them both equally, I would say. Where agency life, what I love about it is you're really able to take tactics and ideas from different clients and apply them elsewhere, so that you're able to have a really nice, well-rounded view of whatever's going on in the digital ecosystem, because you're working with so many voices. But the nice thing about also going in-house for a brand is that you're really able to kind of hone in and become completely obsessed with a singular vision. And kind of, it does consume your thoughts if you're, a worker like I've always been, where, you're just constantly thinking of ideas. And it's nice when you can focus on one area. So something that was brand new to me when I got to the Barcode was franchising. And I will say forever that I have a very love-hate relationship with franchising. It is, for anyone who's ever been in the industry, it's very, let's say, thankless, especially for people in marketing, because just the way that the nature of the business works, the way that the payout structure works for marketing in particular, it just does create this kind of interesting process where you're kind of at everyone's beck and call. That being said, I was so fortunate to work with some incredible franchisees, not just at the Barcode, but also at my next job at Exponential. And what I loved about that was the thing that I took away from that experience was that I really loved working with entrepreneurs. I loved working with these people that were hungry and had hustle and wanted to start their own businesses. And I loved helping them and guiding them through that process. So even though I was, a lot honestly younger than a lot of the people that I was advising, they took my opinions and they trusted them and they trusted my vision. And it was really just a time where I understood what it was like to have responsibility for other people's livelihood too. These franchisees were relying on me to come up with ideas to drive them revenue and bring new people in the door. So I didn't take that lightly. And it's definitely something that to this day, that's why I'm so passionate about working with my clients and being strategic who I work with, because if in your corner, I'm all in your corner.
Yeah, it needs to be something that you feel aligned with, or how can you really help them create that vision if you're not super bought into it as well? Like that, I have to give you some credit. So Dana actually helped me with a lot of the marketing strategy around Thea, and like your excitement around it was just palpable. And I'm sure you're bringing that to all your clients, right? Like you can feel that you were in my corner.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that came through. I love Thea. Shout out to Thea. Everyone should join it. It's an incredible community. But yes, absolutely. That's, that is really why I decided to eventually become a corporate dropout. I know we're not there yet in my journey, but this is when that nagging feeling in the back of my mind started of, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if all of this was mine, because there is an element sometimes, especially in franchising and in agency life, that you're the one doing all the work, but you're not necessarily the one getting the credit because people above you are the ones, taking the credit, or, they're the ones really driving the ship. And I kept having this nagging feeling of, wouldn't it be amazing if all of this was kind of me? And I feel like I could do that. But I obviously didn't make that leap for a few years after that. But this was definitely with franchising where that spark of an idea started hitting me of I could work with entrepreneurs of different, shapes and sizes and help them where they're at in their business.
Yeah, I love that. I want to sidebar real quick on the storytelling thing. So I think I probably intuitively picked this up in sales, and I got to give credit to Salesforce for this too, because they were so big on storytelling in the sales process, right? Like painting that vision and getting the customer bought in. What would you say are like the critical elements to a brand telling a story that resonates?
I think it has to be authentic. I think that's the first thing that always comes to my mind is you can always tell when someone, and especially in marketing, because I think that it's so easy to get distracted by all the promotions out there, by all the tactics, by all the potential taglines. And I'm guilty of this. I love a good pun. I love some nice alliteration. But when it starts to get too marketing-y and you start to lose sight of the actual authentic truth of why you created this company, I think that's when you start to see that the vision isn't necessarily matching up. I think, not to put any companies on blast because I'm a diehard Glossier fan of their products, but I think that's what we've seen with Glossier as a brand is that the brand has lost some of its original authenticity. And I think consumers really pick up on that really fast, unfortunately, or fortunately nowadays. So I think authenticity and really just practicing what you preach. I think that a story is great, but it's only really a story that people respond to if you're actually consistently driving towards it. So if you tell people this is our story and then you never pick back up those threads again and the rest of your content doesn't come back to that initial story, that then you're doing yourself and your business a disservice, but you're also doing your consumers a disservice because that is what they're there for. So I think that it's trusting your intuition and it's trusting your audience that they're going to be with you on this journey. So, and to me, it's not, I think everyone looks really closely at engagement and numbers and follower count. And I don't want to discredit those metrics because of course metrics are always going to be important in marketing, but I also think that going with your gut and having authentic conversations and pulling in other voices outside of your own to make sure that you are hitting on things that resonate with other people, I would say that's almost an even more important metric to be paying attention of when you're thinking through the storytelling aspect of a brand.
That's really good advice. And okay, so sidebar on the sidebar. One thing, is that a thing? We're going to make it a thing.
Sidebars on sidebars. Let's do it.
One thing I am consistently a bit surprised about is how difficult of a time people have owning their own narrative and story. And I don't know if that's because people are afraid to like pull back the curtain and show the stuff that they're not like super proud of or what, but like what tips would you give to the individual person who's trying to build a personal brand and is just having a hell of a time owning that story?
It's a really great question. And I will say that I've been guilty of this also ever since I started Moonstone. I'm way more in my head about what I post. And I am so like a do what I say, not what I do person, because if you were to look at Moonstone, you'd be like, you should probably be posting a little bit more and maybe even being a little more raw and authentic. What I would say is think about your brand as your best friend. What would you say to your best friend if they're feeling insecure, if they're feeling a lack of confidence, if they're feeling that things just aren't clicking for them? That same advice, I would take that to your brand and think, what would you tell your best friend who's saying that, I can't put myself out there? You would say, just try, start with a little bit at first, do with what you're comfortable. So those are all the same things that I would apply to your business. I would say one, authenticity means different things to different people. And just because authenticity is important does not mean that you need to be responsible for putting every single thing about yourself out there on the internet. Some things can and still should be private. And that is completely at an owner's discretion. I think where vulnerability comes into play and where I think it starts to get a little easier is just lifting the curtain a little bit. You don't need to lift the curtain necessarily into your mind or your soul. You can lift the curtain into your business and say, hey, come with me on a day. This is what I do. And starting to figure out what are moments in your day that actually would be interesting content, and starting to build out a content strategy that dips you in a little bit. If you're not ready to necessarily be the face and focal point of your entire brand, great. There's a lot of other content pillars you can pull in that are personalized without being something that's hyper personal. For instance, on Moonstone, I just started doing playlists, and that feels like something very personal to me because music is a huge part of my life. I am always listening to music when I'm working on my clients. So I figured, great, I'm going to make playlists of the music I'm listening to. And it's a way for me to give people a little peek behind the curtain without necessarily giving them the whole shebang. So I think there's ways and levels of comfort if you're not 100% ready to put it all out there.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm going to have to get a playlist from you for the next co-working power hour that we do with Thea.
Yes, please.
I'm curious your thoughts on this too, and then we'll move on to the rest of the interview. But when I initially launched the Corporate Dropout podcast, and when I was in the building stages of Thea, well, I still am, but like in the early building stages, one of the things that was sort of holding me back, actually not sort of, that was holding me back, there were periods in my life where I was, unhappy with myself, self-loathing, and that often was reflected in not being so nice to other people, whether to their face or behind their back. That was one of the things that I really came out and owned of like, you know what? I've had points in my life where I have not been the nicest person, and where someone might be shocked to find out I'm doing like a women's empowerment podcast and company. But like I owned that because I felt like that was sort of disarming it and getting it out of the way so that I could move forward. If people have like skeletons in the closet, so to speak, what do you think about them kind of airing that in a way that, makes sense and is productive? Do you think that that's a good move or not so much?
Absolutely. And I think especially when you're starting a business, I think starting a business is as much of a commitment as getting married, or choosing to have a child. Like it is something that is now a living, breathing thing that lives kind of alongside of you. So I think that you have to be 100%, again, back to the authentic part, you have to be 100% authentic to yourself. And if you're feeling that there's something holding you back, or there's work that you need to do with yourself, that's something that I would highly recommend doing alongside that journey of starting a business. And it was definitely something that, for me with my mental health and, things that we'll get into that happened right as when I started the business, I really did kind of have to take a hard look at myself and figure out, another thing for me is knowing the kind of worker that I am. I tend to be very, I guess my bosses would probably use the word passive aggressive in terms of I would take everything on and then I'd sit there and be really mad at them for giving me all the work, even though I was the martyr who took it on. And that was a big thing that I told myself when I start this business, you cannot do that. You are now the person who's deciding these things. So you can't blame other people, and you can't sit there in a bad mood on Zoom because things didn't go your way. So it is a time to look at yourself and think, this is what kind of version of myself do I want to bring into this business? And who would I want if I'm my business partner, basically, because it's a business of one, would I want to partner with myself? And if there's even a hesitancy, then maybe those are some things to work out before you sign the dotted line on that LLC.
Oh man. Yeah. That's such good advice. Like, it's wild to me. I honestly feel like becoming an entrepreneur, the biggest lift is the personal development piece. I'm going through some of that right now. I was just telling, Chase, my producer who's on, he's like, hey, Like he's reminded me probably 20 times, can you send over the ad scripts for Thea? And I keep delaying, and I finally just like came clean. I'm going to do a live about this actually, but I sent him a voice note. I'm like, you know what? Like part of me is like scared. Like what if this fails? Like it's almost easier to just like not go there. Right. Because when you put this out into the world, if no one wants it, that's hard. It's almost easier to sabotage yourself. So yeah, you got to do a lot of inner work if you're going to become a dropout and go your own way. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And people don't talk about that.
Yeah. And it definitely doesn't, it's not like all of a sudden you start your business and guess what? I'm fixed. You know, it's an ongoing journey, but I think you need to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses and not just the ones that you tell in a job interview, but your actual strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the way that you work or the way that you view work in your work-life balance, and come to terms with those things as you're building that business.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, if you're still interviewing for jobs, when they say what your weakness is, don't say something like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. They hear that in every interview. Come up with something better. Throwing that out there.
You're like, I can't stop looking at myself in Zoom because that's 100% my weakness. If I'm on a Zoom call, my face is going straight to my own picture.
I saw a really funny reel about that. I'm going to have to find it and send it to you. I was like wanting to recreate it. I laughed so hard, but yes. That
it's
is
just
so
a common truth. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you say that you don't, you're lying. Okay. All right. So after you leave Barcode, you became the chief marketing officer for Exponential for one of their brands. And for those of you that don't know, Exponential is a huge company. They own Club Pilates, Pure Barre, some other brand, Yoga 6, I think. And you were the chief marketing officer for Stride, correct?
Yes. So it was their newest vertical at the time that I got recruited. So they bought 2 more since then. So Exponential was always kind of the white whale in fitness franchising. It was definitely the one that we looked to because they started, the CEO started absorbing different brands. Pure Barre was one of them. And obviously they were our biggest competitor at the Barcode. So we always paid attention to what they were doing. But I'm a big fan of, you can play nice in the sandbox. So I try not to look at other businesses as direct competitors because I think there's a lot of room out there for a lot of different voices. But in fitness, of course, there is competitors, and they were definitely the big fish in the pond. So I got a call, from a recruiter that basically did change my life and went through a very quick process. It was about a month from beginning to end with interviewing. I flew out to California for this interview. So the company was based in Orange County in Southern California. And I am in Chicago, born and raised. So I'm a Midwestern girl through and through, and we'll get back to that later. So I was recruited, moved out to California. My salary went through a massive increase. Everything, quality of life really changed for me. I got a car for the first time since high school, and just a lot of things felt like they were moving in the right direction. I just turned 30, so it felt like a really good time for me to make that leap professionally. So it was very difficult to leave my friends and family, move across the country for this new job, but I was so excited. And I think it's one of those things where with the whole way the story will go, I think it'll be easy for me to regret this move, but I don't for a second. I know that it was what I needed to do. I know that it was the right time. I'd always thought and talked about moving to California. And so it was great that I got to experience that. But I did get there, and I, want to caveat that I absolutely adored my team that I worked with, and I adored the best part about Exponential is I got to work alongside other CMOs that were, that was incredible because I got a really robust marketing education there because, again, I'm fully self-taught. I only know what I know. And at Barcode, I was doing as much as I could, but I wasn't necessarily seeing how all the pieces fit together. And I get to Exponential and my career just kind of doubled. It felt like my education, my knowledge, and then COVID hit. And a lot changed, and I know that it affected a lot of people, but it affected me a lot in particular because of, mental health is definitely anxiety, something I've struggled with for a long time, including OCD and germophobia. So COVID was pretty much my worst nightmare. And I was across the country from my whole family. So it was just a really kind of scary time. So my reaction was to throw myself into work. So I dedicated myself to my franchisees. I dedicated myself to my team. And we made some, no pun intended, really great strides that year. We grew from a, one location studio that had just opened our second location February 2020 to a full brand throughout COVID. So, talk about having things working against you. It was truly a time where we all had to come together and figure out what was the best for the brand and, made a lot of sacrifices, but did what we needed to do. And of course, couldn't have done any of it without Exponential behind us. But it was a lot. And that was the moment in my career where I realized that money and success, these are not the things that drive me. Unfortunately, it's, I wish, maybe I do wish that I was someone that was a little more like financially motivated. And that's not to say I'm not, but the things that really do drive me are inside. They're emotional tethers. They're things that speak to my soul. And unfortunately, I just was not getting that at that job. I was kind of very burnt out with franchising. The culture of the office just didn't really light up my soul. So, that was when the mindset for me around making that leap to be my own boss, that was when that really started to become a lot clearer for me, because I was kind of home all the time too with, working remote, and it just gives you a lot of time to think. And then, the Great Resignation started happening. You started seeing all these articles come out about why people should quit their jobs. And, I was talk about the right PR messaging at the right timing. It was like this light bulb moment that was, really did make me feel like it was possible. And I, again, never could have gotten there in my career without the incredible education that I got at my last job. And the fact that also, I think from an ego standpoint, there was no role I was going to grow to past CMO other than CEO. And so that was, in my mind, kind of the natural next progression of my career. I've kind of, maybe it's the OCD talking, but I've loved in my career that I've gone, a really nice through line. I went from a manager to a director to a VP to a CMO. And so I was interviewing for jobs that were VP level or director level. And I don't know, they, again, just weren't really firing me up. I felt like I was at once over and underqualified for certain jobs. And the whole process of interviewing just really wasn't going anywhere for me. And then my mother, my lovely mother, was like, real talk, I don't think that you're going to get another job. And I was like, okay, well, where does that leave me? Where do I go from here? And she's like, you've been thinking about this for a long time. I think it's time you think about starting your own business. And luckily my dad, he's a CPA, he's an accountant. So I was like, great that you think this. Let's see what dad has to say, because he's much more logical and financially minded. And, with where I was at, and I was able to make that leap financially. And he, having a CPA in the family made that a lot easier, because he was like, we'll walk you through it. He walked me through the whole process of getting my LLC. But yeah, so long story short, I was at Expo for 2.5 years, mostly during COVID, and then started the corporate dropout, made that leap in July. So officially July 2021.
All right. So I have a couple follow-up questions. So the first is, was there like a light bulb aha moment of, I have to go my own way? Was it the conversation with your mom, or was there like, is there anything that you could pinpoint that happened where it was like, it's time, I'm doing this?
Yeah. And so, obviously I hate to get too political with things, but June of 2020 was a very, it was a very controversial time in this country. And I think marketers tend to be very empathetic because they see everything online. And that if you make statements or don't make statements, that's making a statement. And, when everything was going on, when the George Floyd posts were going on, I was restricted from making a post about it. I was restricted from making a post about the Ahmaud Arbery shooting, and we had a running brand. And it just, those were things that I just felt like I wasn't speaking my authentic truth. I felt like, whether or not politics have a place in brands, that's up for debate. Absolutely. But I felt like where we were in the moment, what was going on, the fact that we are consumer driven brands, to not say something and to be hemming and hawing about it for days and days really did not sit right with me. So it was about a year that I sat on that feeling and that energy of knowing that, and I wasn't alone in thinking that. It just really did, unfortunately, make me realize that there are, and if you want to be speaking your authentic truth, you do kind of need to be owning your own company, unless you have an incredible boss or mentor or leader that is willing to, let you have that voice. I realized that it was time for me to start to honor that truth, that I do think things are important, and I do think there are different morals and pillars that should drive businesses. And I think, again, with consumers getting more and more savvy, this is something you see a lot in marketing. People want companies that put their money where their mouths are. Yeah. So I think that really spoke to me as something that I could change and have an actual effect on things moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, this is okay. So we're going to sidebar on this too. It's crazy to me. I mean, and I know that it's true, but like, it's crazy to me that it's political, like posting about just the value of everyone's life. You know what I mean? Like, and I never share like where I'm at on the spectrum because it doesn't matter. And we're in such a polarized place.
100%.
Like, I do have a question for you though. Do you feel like, I don't know the best way to articulate this. I feel like a lot of times when people are posting or brands are posting, it comes off as just like virtue signaling. And like that actually irritates me more than if they had said nothing at all. What's your thought on that?
No, I 100% agree with you. I think that it's such a fine line because, again, I think it goes back to that storytelling aspect and it goes back to defining your brand. And something that I do early on with clients is not only define their, yes, your mission, your vision, but also really defining your brand values. These are the things that are going to guide your brand ongoing. So in my mind, I always think about this with Pride Month. You see companies come out of the woodwork with rainbow colored things and you're like, great, where are you the other 11 months of the year? So in my mind, if inclusivity is a part of your brand, then that should be a part of your brand 365 days a year. And that does not mean that you need to change your logo to rainbow in a summer month, but on the other hand, I do think that brands, whether or not they want to, there is a responsibility to their consumer and there's a responsibility to, and sometimes make statements, and whether or not it's truly how you feel and whether or not it is just virtue signaling, which I 100% know is true. I do sometimes think that silence speaks volumes also, but so I don't know. It's a really tricky conversation. And by no means do I think, it's a black and white, there's a right answer and a wrong answer. But I just knew in that moment that I wanted the ability to choose. Yeah. I wanted the ability for ultimately that decision to rest on my shoulders because I was the one and am the one the most in touch with the brand. I'm the one who lives in the brand all day long. So the fact that these decisions were being made up the chain from people who were less emotionally tied to the brand, I think that's what hurt me more than even just not saying something. It's more just, I would have liked to be able to make that decision because truthfully, it was my job to make that decision. The CMO is the one who makes that decision. So I think it was in that moment when I thought to myself, great, where am I? I have my dream job. I have my dream title. I'm C-level, but I don't actually have the decision-making skills or abilities that I should have at this level. And so I was like, you know what? The chains need to be like broken off of my barriers because I do have things to say. And whether or not I think that everyone should be saying things about everything, I just think that you need to relinquish that control to marketing teams. Yeah. And this is something I hope this is on my gravestone, but literally give marketers more power. That is the biggest advice, whether you guys are staying in your corporate job or becoming a corporate dropout, pay attention to the marketing teams, pay attention to your own intuition when it comes to marketing, because it really does matter. And I think that it's important to let the people who are closest to the brand have a say and have a voice.
Yeah. And there's really no better way to do that than being your own boss. Okay. So,
exactly.
So you drop out and then tell us how did you found Moonstone? I also, whenever it feels aligned, I want you to share what happened when you moved back to Chicago as well. But tell us that whole story.
Yeah. So I filed my LLC in July. I very luckily, spoke to my boss, and he was very supportive. He knew that, he knew I hadn't been happy there for a while. Again, didn't have a great poker face about it. And, was very honest about how I was feeling. So I was able to have a nice little slow exit, and still hold on to my corporate salary for a couple extra months, which really helped. Got my first client in August, when I had no business because I had truly no company. but they are still a client to this day, Bardega Cocktail Club. They're an incredible cocktail subscription service, and I love them so much. And that was really exciting because I knew I didn't want to stay in franchising. I didn't want to stay in fitness. So what's the kind of the opposite of that? Great, I'm going to go work with a cocktail company. So it was exciting to me because really the second I filed my LLC, I knew it had to be something with moons. I have always loved the moon since I was a little girl. I love that, the moon controls the tides, controls astrology, controls our monthly cycles. Like there's so much cool. I know you're into this stuff too. Yeah. So there's so much, like the moon is just the coolest, most feminine power and energy source, in the universe. So I just thought that's going to be a part of the business. I've always loved that the phases of the moon do really kind of control where our personalities and where our moods are at on a monthly basis. So I was like, there's got to be a link there. So when I created Moonstone, it was with the mindset of having different phases for different businesses. So that's still how the model is. I have a new moon, a half moon, and a full moon program. It really, again, the company just kind of popped into my head. Like it just created itself, basically. Like it poured out of me. It was the most natural evolution I ever felt. This brand was just exactly what I wanted it to be. I got a friend of mine who's an absolutely incredible photographer. She works with celebrities all over the place. She was able to do my photos. I worked with our girl Melissa on branding, who's also a Thea Collective mentor. Shout out there.
Yes, big shout out to Melissa. Your branding is on point.
Incredible. Thank you. She really, she would tell you I was very particular. I had a very intense Pinterest board, but it came out, really just beyond my wildest dreams. So my company was starting in August, September, but I didn't want to. I wanted to announce it on Halloween because it felt just very fitting to what the brand was, and Halloween is my absolute favorite day of the year. So I launched it officially on Halloween. So if you're thinking, great, October 2021, that's also an important, memorable date for me because my move back from California to Chicago. So I did leave California and come back to Chicago. I decided that when I was starting my business, I needed roots down somewhere. And unfortunately, I just didn't have those roots in California. My brother lived there. I had wonderful friends out there, but I did want to be close to my parents. I wanted to be a little closer just to what I knew, and also knowing the direction I want to go in, working with bars and restaurants and different local businesses. I know how many of those there are in Chicago, and I was really excited to support my city. So I moved back, and October 6th got a call from my moving company that there had been a fire in my moving truck and everything I owned was gone. And it was so completely surreal. It was, I had been saying for weeks leading up to this move, I had been very nervous about this move. I used the same company I used for my original cross-country move. And I was really nervous about it, but I kept saying, I really want a fresh start. I really want a fresh start. And it's like, the universe was like, here you go, girl. I'm like, that's not 100% what I meant. So it was really terrifying because my actual first month where I didn't have my corporate salary, I was on my own for the first time. I had 3 clients at the time, and I had to call them all and kind of explain what happened because I knew I wasn't going to be myself for the next, couple weeks. But I really, as awful as it was, and I will say it was 100%, a trauma. Like I'm 100% dealing with PTSD from it. It was just awful, losing everything, losing my record collection, my, yearbooks, all the articles I had ever written, had been saved. And so it's more things like that. All my clothes, which was neither here nor there, just very depressing. So, it's very irreplaceable things. I love vintage, as I said. So a lot of it's just completely one of a kind. So it was so hard, but at the same time, I kind of thought of it as if I can get through this, I can really get through everything because my clients officially started October 4th. It was a Monday. I lost my stuff on October 6th. And it was like, this is a business and you are responsible for it. And I didn't have time to take weeks off dealing with it. So I did what I needed to do. I threw myself into work. My clients were like, are you okay? Do you want to be on this call? And I'm like, I'm good. So I threw myself back into work and I made it through. I mean, it's still surreal, honestly. Like when I think about it, it's just crazy that it happened to me. And I think when we're talking about doing that personal work with yourself, that was a big thing that I really wanted to, I need to dive into, and I needed to dive into and spend time with. But at the same time, you know, I kind of put my business first, and I don't regret doing that. And luckily, you know, anecdotally, the marketer in me knew how to handle it. I know how consumer-driven brands work because I've worked with them. So I reached out to every single brand that I had an item that was lost and basically told them the story and was like, hey, can I get like a promo code? I got so many gift cards. I got so many credits. I got so much free stuff. So thank you to all these brands that helped me. It was not a scam, I promise. But people were really nice about it. You know, everyone felt awful. And again, it just kind of showed me that if I can get through this, I can get through anything. And it does prove to you that your business comes first, you know, in a lot of aspects, and you do have to sacrifice other things for the business. But if you're willing to do that, I'm 100% proof that your hard work does pay off. Like I am where I'm at. I hit my revenue goals I wanted in my first 6 months. And I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't 100% committed to this company, to the point that I was like, I might not have anything else in my apartment, but I've got my LLC. So, you know.
You know, I just had a thought. Do you feel like part of why you went so hard and were able to achieve those revenue goals so quickly is because like you had no other option?
Absolutely. Yes. But I also think that we as people, and women in particular, are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that like if, as you know, and through, you know, months of therapy, the conclusion I've come to with everything is that women rise to challenges in a way that I find so inspiring. And it's why I will always use Moonstone as a platform to raise up other women. I love working with female clients. I love working with female team members, other female consultants, and outside vendors, because women just don't back away from a challenge. And I do feel like it was such a challenge from the universe, but I took it, you know, as well as I could and came out on the other side. And there's nothing I feel like prouder about than the fact that that shitty thing happened, but it also does not at all define anything in my business. You know, it truly does live outside of it, because my business has been this thing that's been all positive and like pure good energy, because I know I'm doing it for all the right reasons, like not to quote Bachelor, but basically like I'm in it. I'm here for the right reasons. And so my company like fills the gaps that, of course, like losing everything I own, like I do have gaps now, but my business is kind of filled in those gaps because I've made my business into something that I really respect and love. And like, I'm so proud of it. And at the end of the day, that's truly all that matters. And that's all you can ask for. And all the followers and all the engagement and all the great stuff in the world can't take over if you don't feel that for your business. So you have to throw yourself 100% into it. You have to know your why. You have to be authentically true to yourself. And once those things, you feel that click and you're like, this is 100% what I'm meant to do, even if the worst thing happens to me.
Yeah. You know, I was at a leadership training this past weekend, and there was someone who did a training on stage. Her story is honestly one of the most inspiring I've ever heard. She's had a lot of crazy hard things happen to her, including her home burning down. And she was talking about, but she bounced right back. They were in a new home the next day. One of the things she talked about was this guy, Jocko Willink, who I haven't listened to, but I'm going to start. He was on a bunch of different Navy SEAL teams. And anytime something really bad or hard happens, his response is good, because this, and this is going to happen as a result of it. Like, I'm going to level up. Looking back at this now that you're, about 6 months removed, do you feel like you can say good that your moving van blew up?
Yes and no. Like, yes, I really try to.
Loaded question.
I really try to. There are some times where like something that I owned, I'll remember it and I'll be like, and it will like hit me with like a wave. But I will say that it did give me an opportunity that I took as the silver lining, is I was like, you know what? I'm going to level up some stuff. Like, I bought myself an adult cookware set and all these things that I probably wouldn't have made that investment in, and like a very nice desk and work setup. So these are things that I probably needed to make investments in for my own happiness and fulfillment. So the biggest takeaway I think that I had is that stuff is just stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am, you know, a materialistic person by nature who really isn't. And I think that for someone who is materialistic, it really did prove like, okay, if stuff's just stuff now. And it's kind of nice because I have this very like removed attachment to the things I own now, which is maybe a lot healthier.
Yeah.
So, and it also taught me a very valuable life lesson that do not just let things sit in your closet, beautiful things, wear them, take them out in the town. Cause I had all this beautiful stuff that was like, I hadn't worn in years. And that's like the biggest thing I regret is I'm like the unlived lives of my beautiful 1990s Chanel pencil skirt, like the unlived lives that it could have had. So in my mind, like the biggest takeaway I can have is that stuff is just stuff and that's okay. And enjoy the stuff that you do have. Use it and play with it.
So in Thea Collective at time of recording, we have a book club and we're reading Think Like a Monk. And the chapter that we're on this week, it's talking about that non-attachment. And he gives an example of, if you own something amazing, you shouldn't be like worried about losing it. You should act as if, like he gives the example of if you rented a luxury vehicle, you wouldn't be sad that it wasn't yours. You would really enjoy the rental period and you would drive that convertible up and down PCH, like relishing in it. And like, what a concept if we treat everything like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I think that that's beautiful, but I mean, also easier said than done.
It is, but you know what? It really does prove that the things that do matter. And the things that matter to me is I had my family and my friends and my business. Yeah. And those are the things I still have. And those are the things that, hopefully you can't burn down.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So final interview question. One of the things that really drew me to you was just your embrace of like the feminine and like the witchy stuff that we're into, right? Like astrology and like just, unapologetically owning that. What advice would you give for the female want to be entrepreneur or founder that really wants to embrace that like kind of witchy woo woo out there side, but is afraid that that's going to make people think she's a weirdo or unprofessional? Like, what would you say to that woman listening?
I would say that we are in the renaissance of the weirdo. That's what I absolutely love about this time that we're in right now is I do feel like this is, aside from witchy things now being trendy, I feel like I have a very love and hate relationship with social media because it's not always the best for people's mental health with the comparisons. But what is nice is people are able to really find the niches that speak to them and they're able to find the content that resonates with them. So my advice to you is that if it's important to you, if it means something to you, if it sparks something in you, there are other people who share that passion. There are other people who will recognize that spark in themselves too. And anyone who doesn't, you don't want to work with them anyway. If anyone was to say, I really want to work with you, but I'm just not into the moon stuff, sorry, move along. This is my whole vibe. I'm in it to give I've done enough jobs where I've given half of myself or hidden parts of myself because I thought that was going to help me be more successful or help people like me better. The best thing after I lost everything else, I also lost that, which is awesome. I have zero fear or insecurity that people aren't going to like me for the stuff I put out there because I know that if people don't like me, there will be other people that do like me for it. And those are the people I want to work with. There are people who find me and say, I love what you're doing. I love the vibe. I feel it through the social media screen. And that's what I want. If my, little tarot stuff speaks to someone and that's the way they want to think about marketing, then great. That is the person that I am here for. So just know you'll find your tribe and live your high vibe.
Yes. I love it so much. And, every yes is a no to something else. So if you're just giving yeses to people that don't feel aligned to work with, you're closing. What is it? It's like you can't, I forget the phrase, but it's like back in the day when people would go to dances, you'd have like a dance card or something. And it's like your dance card is full with like people you don't want to be dancing with, like the people you do want to, like they can't get in,
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're feeling the need to compromise your own values or the things that are important to you to fit for someone else, that's not a good fit.
Yeah.
And that goes to corporate and really all aspects of your life. So that's live your authentic truth and your tribe will 100% find you.
Yes. Amen to that. All right. So you're doing a business tip mini episode for us after this on how to set smart marketing goals. So be sure everyone to come back for that. Before we sign off, Dana, where can people find you, connect with you, work with you, plug anything you want? We are here for the plugs.
Fantastic. So yes, I own a small marketing and social media agency. It is a vision-led agency for intuitive founders. So it is called Moonstone Marketing. You can find me online. It's moonstonemktg.com. And that's also my handle. So on Instagram, you can follow me on Spotify. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Moonstone Marketing. And I would love to work with you. I work with businesses, small and independent businesses that are really looking to glow and thrive. So
and you can help with anything from like a launch and promotional calendar strategy up to like on retainer every month, like doing a number of things. So, regardless of the size, like talk to Dana if you feel a connection with her and figure out a way to work together. She's
absolutely
awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm excited for the next episode and we'll see you all back here tomorrow. This episode was brought to you by Thea Collective, the learning community I founded for entrepreneurs. Text BIZ, that's BIZ, to 949-577-8709 or head to thea-collective.com. That's THEIA-collective.com to learn more. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed today's episode, please help me get the word out about the corporate dropout by screenshotting and sharing this on social. I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and leave a 5-star rating and review as well. And I do this show for you, and I want to hear from you. So tell me, what is it that you want more of? Text me at 949-541-0951 or slide into the DMs at Corporate Dropout Official or Alacia Citro with 2 underscores. Until next time.